Okay, now we have folks here in our audience in the South Interior Building in Washington, D.C. We still have our state representatives on the line. And of course, we have our panel right here with me. So I wanted to start out and ask, first of all, prompt our panel members for questions that they might have for their counterparts right here on the panel. So do any of the agencies at the table, and I'll go ahead and include our state representatives on the phone too, do they have any questions for each other based on the remarks that were made this morning? Joe Nimick.
Jim, one of the biggest challenges we have in terms of emergency response at FEMA is actually getting folks that are in a danger zone to realize the significance of that. And there's always this balance between, particularly when it's a commercial entity, the balance between business, the normal processes of business, and the safety of what goes on. And as good as the National Weather Service is, often we're confronted when we ask for an evacuation or so, and again, I'm in my domestic world, but I think the same holds true in the offshore infrastructure with, I don't want to evacuate if it's not real. I want to wait till the last minute, and then problems occur. So I guess my question goes to API and to our DOE rep in terms of that tension that exists between, if you shut down the facilities, you really do have a major impact on the economy because the price of petrochemical products goes up. There may be shortages, but at the same time, you've got this safety factor, and I'm really looking to see if there's lessons learned there that I can take away, because our biggest challenge and where we receive the most deaths is people not evacuating when they've been asked to evacuate.
Sure, great question, Joe. I think I'm going to actually have two people respond to that. First, Bill Bryan from DOE, and then Lars Herbst from BSEE, because I think they represent sort of the supply needs of the country versus the safety needs of the people working offshore.
And I'll leave it up to BSEE to comment on when they actually, for the safety reasons, evacuate offshore. I will tell you that industry, and I can speak primarily to those on the onshore side, obviously safety for their personnel is first and foremost. And being able to do a graceful shutdown in the energy systems at refineries and so on and so forth is much better when it comes to starting back up, and really does shorten down the restoration time as opposed to waiting for things to go down due to the event. All right. But they've taken some steps within the industry to actually harden some of the facilities within that site to be able to keep a team there to monitor the events as it comes through. So they're able to do that restart a little bit sooner. Another thing they've been able to do in the oil industry is actually set up outside, almost kind of like mirrors the mutual assistance on the electric side, is they've learned that when these storms come through, their own people, such as the Coast Guard pointed out earlier, their own people are often impacted by the event. And so it's really difficult for them to be able to respond knowing that their family's in need and in need of support. So a lot of the refineries have done that same thing in the fuel side down in the Gulf. They've actually contracted with other companies or have mutual agreements with other companies that they will actually come in to do that graceful startup once an event comes through to speed up that restoration timeline. There's a period where and just from our experience in working in this, refineries can take a period of time. They can be down a week, sometimes even 10 days before you really start noticing the impact because of the supplies that are on hand. And a lot of that varies on the time of year. A lot of that varies on the kind of fuel that's being produced right now, and then it gets back to the EPA waivers about using different types of boutique fuels during the off seasons. But it really are those very large events that we potentially could have some problems. So, but that's at this stage. I'll turn over to BSEE now to talk about how they go about doing the evacuation of the platforms.
Great, Lars.
Okay, what I'd add to that is that's really about tee times for evacuation. and that can vary whether it's production or it's drilling operations. But those are well established within industry. So the tee time, how long it takes to get a facility or a rig in a safe condition, or in the case of a dynamic position rig, to get it off location. So they're aware of how long that takes in each case. In each drilling rig, it's different depending on where they are in the well. It takes longer. The problems I think we've seen in the past is the hurricanes that form actually in the Gulf. Those are the ones that give difficulty for industry to react quick enough. Those that come from off the African coast, plenty of time to prepare and get that done. Some of industry has moved very far along on electronic systems, the SCADA systems, the supervisory control and data acquisition systems. They can actually leave some systems producing, and when the hurricane force winds start approaching that facility, they can remotely shut those in from onshore, where they mirror those SCADA systems. So it's well established. I think we really haven't had problems with that in recent years, except for the potential where storms evolve right on top of the facilities.
Thanks, Lars. Any other panel members want to weigh in on that question? Okay, I have another question for the panel. And this has to do with communications. The question is, what more needs to be done to improve communication and coordination between our agencies and between the federal government and the states? So maybe I'll tee you up again, Bill, and then I'll actually be thinking about this, the folks on the line from the states, because I do want to get your input on this one.
Sure. First, I want to key in on something Joe from FEMA mentioned earlier. And he made the comment that they don't have the authorities to do things offshore, or have this mission offshore. They're more focused within the states. And it prompted something in my mind that I thought would be interesting to bring up. Is we talked a lot about ESF 12, the Emergency Support Function 12. And a lot of in fact, these ESFs were stood up to support the national response function, and often, and rightly so, people associate these functions to Stafford Act events, FEMA designated events. Where the president says, we have a state of emergency, FEMA gets involved, they activate the ESFs, and under the Stafford Act, we deploy and do what we do. But I will tell you that the ESFs, at least from the Department of Energy's perspective, is a structure and a function that can operate even outside of Stafford Act events. And I think that's important to state that. We don't need to have a Stafford Act event to utilize the structure that is put in place. It's a structure that works. It can always get better, and we're working very hard to make that function more robust within the Department of Energy. But getting to the specific question on information sharing, there are really, we can't do this alone within the Department of Energy. There are three things that we definitely rely on our interagency partners to help us with along the way. One of those is collaboration and information sharing. We recently had an interagency data working group. We convene one of these every year before an event, just to make sure that all of our key partners that have data that feeds into our situational reporting and also feeds into the management decision chain are on tap and on target to deliver that data. And as technology changes, the means of getting that data changes. The means that we have to collect that and display that, visually display that, as well as validate that data and report that data. It's forever changing. So having these interagency working groups is very critical. We are not the owners of all information. All right, a lot of people will turn to us for answers, but whether it's a pipeline issue we'll get called about, or an impact to the economy issue, or what's going on offshore, many people at this table and out there in the government that aren't at this table have data points that the Department of Energy needs to put that whole picture together for the customers that come to us for the answer. So that collaboration and information sharing is so vital and so critical, and it happens at every level. We have folks at the state level. In fact, going into the future, I will probably be the senior energy liaison in the field, at the field, trying to identify potential areas of problems that we have actually during an event. So that collaboration, information sharing is critical before an event occurs as well as during an event, and having those things in place. The second piece is analysis. All right, that data is critical, and the analysis that we do needs to at least be done under the umbrella of ESF 12. Like I said, we are not the brain trust for everything that's going on, but we are expected to provide that common picture for the energy industry and for the energy sector, whether it's electricity, oil, and gas. And that involves information coming in from our industry partners, as well as information being gathered from our interagency partners. And collectively, which is the reason why we're bringing all these elements together within our operations center, collectively we will do that analysis. And we will have a consistent government answer as far as what's happening. And there shouldn't be any surprises, and there shouldn't be any cabinet secretaries in conflict about what's being reported. It's just very critical that ESF 12 maintain and be held accountable to maintain that position of being able to report out the energy situation for the nation. And then finally, the communications piece, and that's making sure we communicate that message up as well as out, out to those consumers out in the field, out to the citizens, and also up the chain to our senior leaders and clear up to the White House. But again, the communication structure is with the ESFs are in place under the National Response Framework. We need to utilize it, and all the ESFs need to be held accountable to manage that and produce.
Thanks, Bill. Let me go out to our state representatives out there, and the question again is, what more needs to be done to improve communication and coordination between the federal government and the states?
Morning, this is Gwen Keenan from Florida.
Go ahead, Gwen.
I think Rear Admiral Brown alluded to the old adage about the value of the plan is in the planning, and I think the improved planning that we have experienced in the recent years has really inherently improved the communications, because it's built those relationships, I think, even more soundly, and gotten us away from again the adage of, the time to exchange business cards isn't in the middle of the response. So I would go so far as to say, I think from the Florida perspective, we are enjoying some of the best interagency communications that we have ever, at least in recent history, experienced from the unified command concept being effectively implemented when it's needed. I think the biggest challenge for communications from our perspective is effective communications with local government and the public, particularly in the National Contingency Plan arena. By nature, the NCP tends to be top-down, and NRF is bottom-up, and sometimes I think that creates a public messaging challenge. So I think that's, for Florida, that's our significant place to work on, is building better communications with our local governments and our public.
Thanks, Gwen. Joe.
I want to build on the planning aspect and go into the exercising aspect, because while you develop good relationships and better communications through planning, your best bet is to either exercise it. And from a hurricane perspective, there's probably no better exercised event than hurricanes. Starting with the President of the United States holds a hurricane exercise that he personally participates in. Just earlier this week, we were at the White House to do a cabinet-level hurricane exercise. Department of Defense in the state of Florida conducted a major exercise about hurricanes. We go out to every governor and we talk to them, so that this understanding that it is not just during the event, but it's continual refreshing of that communications is the only way you're going to keep it alive and active. And to build on Bill's point is, and what I hope came across is, the ESF structure, the National Response Framework, is there no matter whether it's a FEMA-led or not, and FEMA can coordinate or support for other entities through that ESF structure. It exists from the federal perspective to help the states in any type of a major event, including forest fires, droughts, and while the National Contingency Plan mirrors the National Response Framework for the offshore, an event where pollution does exist, during the BP oil spill, the NRF, the ESF stood up to be able to take the other aspect of that, of what was happening at the states, because of that good communications we've got with the states.
Great. Yeah, go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, this is Pete Brown from the Coast Guard. One other thought with regard to data and communications is that I think it's incumbent upon us, the organizations represented here, to start to move toward more sophisticated measures. We tend to gravitate, for a variety of reasons, toward what I'd call first-generation measures, tallies. We count things, where the real impact and the quality of the response is really measured in throughput, whether it's throughput of energy flows, whether it's transportation of people, transportation of goods. So I think we can organizationally work toward improving our data measures so that they really tell the story and don't create a misleading picture of, well, we need to work over there because we only have 3 of 20 facilities up and running. Yeah, but if we did this over here, those 3 of 20 would produce 50% of the desired capacity.
That's a great point.
Jim, it really builds on a point that Bill made before, which is that common operating picture. And as soon as that becomes distinct to different entities, communications breaks down. It's going back to allowing a single entity to develop that, have the proper metrics that we all understand from that common operating picture. Because if the state or industry is looking at a different set of criteria, I guarantee the communications will break down.
Good. Cynthia?
2 thoughts going back to Hurricane Sandy. The first with respect to how states can work better together with the federal government. One thing that came up during that period, and it was less in my role as the overseer of the pipeline program and more the HAZMAT program, was that a number of different states had laws that applied to the transportation of fuel that needed to be waived in a very quick way. And we were able to do it, frankly, because of personal relationships we had with people in those states. It would be good if, in advance of a hurricane, the states were to begin to look at their own laws and think about the kinds of effects that might happen and identify those rules and laws that might need to be waived in order to ensure that the product continued to move to the people as quickly as possible when they needed it. A second is following up a little bit on Bill's comments about some of the aftermath of Superstorm Sandy, and that is, there were a number of questions that came to us with respect to the pipeline infrastructure and the fact that there was not oil and gas available on the ground in some of those states. And some of the information is information that we were able to obtain by talking to our industry partners on a quick basis. But you know, now that we're beyond that, I would hope that we could begin to put together some sort of a map that talks about the abilities of the infrastructure to carry oil and gas, what the refineries are doing, and to have that someplace, you know, and I don't know if it's the Department of Energy, perhaps it is, it's available to folks so that if an emergency does occur, we know what facilities, when there's effect, where we really need to fill in the gaps. We were doing that, you know, as things were happening during that incident. It would be good to have that stuff in the can and ready to go across the country.